So when Naumburg approached me with the possibility to commission a piece, Lera actually were on the top of the list, and I was so happy when you agreed to do it, because I've heard some of your music, and you have such a personal style, and I thought this will be a really different piece than what we actually have for saxophone and piano already. How did you feel about the setting, about the instrument, and about the task to write this piece?
Well, I've worked a lot with the saxophone quartet formation. I've worked with, especially with the Russia saxophone quartet, and wrote some very large pieces for saxophone quartet and choir, 72 Angels, and then gallows songs, and so I've been very immersed in actually all four saxophones, and also have written a work for saxophone solo, but I've never written a work for saxophone and piano, and so from start I wanted it to be a major work, work that fills space, sort of time and presence, and that could also, to me, the saxophone is such a versatile instrument and so expressive. It's so it's capable of so many colors and very deep emotion, and it has also very, of course, very strong high register, but also such a beautiful darker colors, and it's sort of instrument that is quite, I think, limitless in its expressive capabilities. So the piano is, of course, an orchestra, imaginary orchestra. So that's how I approached it, as a very large canvas. This sonata. So even though it's 4 movements, it's really one large presence, one large continuum, and one large storytelling, and so there were no limitations. And of course, I heard you play, so I know that you can do anything and everything, and it made me feel very free to be very expressive.
I remember the first meeting we had. I think, Josef, you agree. The main word that comes into my mind is to make it even more heavy and theatric, operatic. Operatic, I think, was the word you mentioned a lot. And I think this expressiveness, this high level of expressiveness we have to put in the piece every time. This is something that makes it quite unique. Or what do you think, Josef?
Well, I think I very much agree. Saxophone is an incredible instrument. The range and the emotional expressions are limitless, almost. And it's very interesting for me to work with a new instrument. My father is a clarinet player, so it's kind of close, but also different. And what I loved about the piece was the fact that it's very natural for pianists to play. I mean, you're a pianist as well, so a lot of times when we encounter new music, this is not necessarily always the case. Sometimes it's against the hands, and it feels very much pianistic in a wonderful way. So I could focus on the musical side of things right away, and I can listen much more carefully to what you're doing. So that made it very easy for me to connect with you and to focus on the emotions in the music, and not being busy reading all the time and transcribing how to make it more pianistic. So makes a big difference.
Actually, Andreas, my question, because something that you mentioned and also a few people commented, that it feels as a very different work for saxophone repertoire, and of course, I'm curious to hear it from your perspective. Why do you feel it's different?
It's hard. That's hard to explain, I have to say. it's a very honest piece, and it's not. How do you explain this? There's a certain flexibility and this deep expressiveness that gives so much responsibility to the player, actually, so much impact. When I play it, it's so much also about how I can shape the piece. It gives me so many possibilities to make the piece like this or like that. And there's a certain deep interaction that comes, I think, in the process. I think when we started the piece, it took us really some time to dive into it. But as soon as also when we had the possibility to play it for you, it became much clearer for us what we had to do and how extremely important it was to really think what do you want to express? What was your idea of expression and your musical ideas in that? And that makes it quite unique for me.
Well, thank you. To me, this piece feels very tragic, very sort of heavy, and we talked a little bit in rehearsals about this requiem type of feeling, and I think it's also this intensity and this tragic overtones that make it quite draining for the performers, because there is not really a moment where you can sort of let go and relax. It's constantly demands more and more intensity and keeps you on edge.
Absolutely. I think we had this experience, right, Josef?
Yes, I think it's a very serious piece, and a lot of the saxophone repertoire is more on the lighter side of music. Not everything, but a lot of it, and a lot of works are inflected by jazz sounds and jazz music. But I think it's very important for a classical saxophone player to emphasize the colors you don't know so well, which are the more serious colors. And I think what I loved about our collaboration was the fact that it was actually a real collaboration. It was more like working on the piece together, and sometimes you asked us for our input and ideas, and this is not standard, I think. I remember this big discussion and fight between Wittgenstein and Ravel about the left-hand piano concerto, where Wittgenstein said, "We're not slaves." And Ravel said, "Yes, you are slaves." So
we didn't feel like slaves.
We didn't feel like slaves at all. No.
Well, that's certainly good to know. But also, of course, for me, working on a new piece, hearing it for the first time, and as you know, I would get sometimes ideas on the spot, and we would try, let's try this version, let's try this way. So it was very important that we had this chance, well, first of all, to work long distance, because we have now this capability and technology that allows to work across the ocean, which was extremely helpful. But then, of course, also in person. And I feel also from each rehearsal, it was a growing process.
I think what would be really interesting from you to hear, because not everyone will have the luxury to work with you in such an intense way. What would you explain to a young player or to a saxophonist who takes up your piece? What's the core of it?
To dive deeply inside and in a way it puts player almost in this vulnerable position, because you have to access the emotions maybe we don't like to access during our lives. Some of the sadness, the lamentation, the struggle, I don't know, we live in quite troublesome times, and sometimes in order to function throughout the day, we can block all of this from our consciousness. But in order to be able to communicate those feelings through music, one has to, of course, also have access to them and to find them. So it requires this courage for the performer to enter this very deep and maybe dark space within, and to be able to share it. If you remember, I've always encouraged you to take risk. So not to go outside of your safety zone, to go outside of your comfort zone, but into this risk-taking where each gesture, each accent, sforzando, glissando, it's always signifies some kind of emotion and some kind of message beyond. So I always encourage performers to go outside of this safety zone into imagination, searching for contrasts. My music tends to have a lot of contrasts. Fearlessness in this approach, and really communicating this emotional intensity to the audience, and almost kind of ego-less process, because to take those risks, you need to really do it for music's sake, not thinking, well, how it's, where am I in this picture? So, and this is what I appreciated working with two of you, because you really, and in the concert last night, you really were able to bring this emotional intensity and deliver it